All right, welcome. What is this? In morning, afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to this episode of the sixth element of the Shiftwell, six elements that drive human performance. Today's element, of course, is around purpose. We know that purpose fuels performance, and in this session, we'll explore how this purpose, the connection between daily work and a bigger mission, drives motivation, fulfillment, and long-term results. And of course, myself, I'm Elena Agaragimova. I'm a co-founder of Shiftwell.ai, and I'll pass it on to Jordana to introduce herself.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jordana Cole. I'm one of the other co-founders here at Shiftwell and the big well-being nerd on our group.
And our guest of honor, of course, Marc. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, folks. So I think of myself as a life experience designer. I help people remove things that aren't serving them and add things that help them be more fulfilled and more productive. And I do that through coaching, one-on-one, and group coachings. Also, I'm a learning and development professional, so I design, develop, and facilitate training and workshops.
Beautiful. I'm very excited to chat with you, Marc. Before we kick things off, I just want to remind the audience, as you're listening to this, please engage with us. Please comment, ask us questions, share what your thoughts are around this topic and kind of how you see this show up in a workplace and maybe even in your personal lives. And if you're listening to this as a recording later on, then also may reach out to us and feel free to follow up on this conversation. But let's kick us off. So, Marc, we often say purpose fuels performance. So from your perspective, how does it connecting to a sense of purpose that makes such a big difference at work today?
So I think that people want more than just clocking in of like a 9-to-5 job. They want to be able to connect to work that moves them and motivates them and feel like they're contributing something bigger than themselves. They want alignment with their values, the things that's most important, things like creative expression, variety, or creative problem solving. Maybe they get fueled with working and collaborating with their peers. I know as an ideator, someone who loves ideas, I explore the art of the possible. And I believe that many people are trying to check a box to collect the paycheck, and many are using their heads in their work. But some people would love to sink their heads and their heart in their work, but they don't always know how. Or they're afraid to make that leap because it's uncomfortable. Well, I believe that we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable because sometimes for real change to happen, and to make a difference in our lives and others, we need to embrace that.
Marc, I mean, everything you just said, there's research that backs that up. How you describe purpose as contribution greater than ourselves, wanting to find things that align with our values, looking for creativity, variety, novelty. And I love that you call yourself a life experience designer. I mean, clearly there's a reason why you are here with us today, because you are somebody who embodies this in your work. Now, one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about is how we define purpose, because I think a lot of times we're hearing this a lot, right? Purpose is important. People want meaning. And organizations tend to translate that as, okay, we need a mission and we need to connect our employees to our mission. But when we define purpose here at Shiftwell based on the research, it's more than that. It's this personal sense of contribution that's greater than yourself. And that can come from a variety of things, through your job, through hobbies, through volunteering, or just the roles that you take on, making sure that it's aligning with what's important to you or a goal that you're working towards. So when you think about that, how do you think that leaders today can holistically help employees identify what gives them a sense of purpose and bring that to work?
Well, I think part of the solution is for leaders to get curious versus assume they know only from their observations.
I think we just lost her.
I feel like there should be like elevator music happening right now. Just
leaders could potentially offer work stretch opportunities in their department or even adjacent ones temporarily. So taking the time to get to know who you spend most of your day with as a leader, a mentor, or your peers demonstrates authentic leadership and builds meaning and a stronger team.
So we lost you for a half a second there, Marc, and you were talking about a couple things that I just want to reframe what I heard for the audience. So that idea, because I thought the first statement you made was a really powerful one, that instead of making assumptions based on what we observe, It's getting curious and finding out what our people really care about them, what they value, how they see their strengths, what drives them, and then linking that to potential opportunities that could align with what they're talking about. Was that the crux of what you had there?
That was the crux. You got it.
Fantastic. And one thing I'll just add, because when I led teams, when I was internal L&D, I heard this a lot, that people were worried about asking their teams, what do my teams care about? How do they want to spend their time? Because they're afraid they're going to say something like, well, I'm really passionate about being a DJ, and I'd like to focus my learning and development on being a DJ. And I'd be curious, from your perspective, of somebody who is very creative and thinks about creativity and work, how would you handle that?
Well, I think that there's always opportunities to kind of have small little projects you can work on. I mean, I used to work for an employer who would say, here's this is maybe not be a direct line, but it's a dotted line. But if it contributes something to the company, maybe you want to be a DJ, or maybe, you want to explore some new opportunity. I think leaders look forward and look at what's important to their employees, and they just consider what's going to drive them, what excites them, which will have them buy in more to the department and to their management. So I think there's some room for them to have range to be able to do some of that, whether it's as a hobby or maybe it is in the workplace. But I think it's a discussion based on the context and the situation. That's
yeah, I love that answer, Marc, because I think you hit on a couple things. One, sometimes there's opportunities in some of the, I'll call it co-curricular, because it's not really extracurricular part of the job. So if you're an organization that has events, whether it's internally or for clients, if you're an organization that does award ceremonies, there might be a way to tap into that person's interests in a way that also saves your company money, because you're not having to hire somebody externally. And then they feel valued and more engaged because you're connecting with them on the human level. And there's a lot of skills that goes behind, being a DJ and being in front of an audience, being able to notice what people need, being able to sense energy, that adds so much value to an organization, that when you kind of tap into the why and the skills behind that, that can actually really activate some great opportunities. And I like how you called it, of wins for the organization and the person.
If I may add, it's you maybe look at the transferable skills. If that person wants to be a DJ, maybe they MC a large corporate event. So maybe doing some reflection on where can I apply this in other areas that are, in established departments in the organization, or ones that where's some room for growth or creativity for creating a new opportunity. So
yeah.
And we have a comment from Nick Hernandez. Thank you, Nick, for your comments. His purpose: a macro goal that can potentially encompass one's entire life, and once created can serve to integrate all of one's subsequent goal setting. What are your thoughts on that, guys?
I love that, Nick, because there's a couple pieces of that I really love. The word integrate. I think that's one of the things that we struggle with in the workplace, and one of the things that we're trying to solve for at Shiftwell. When we ask questions that tie to engagement and performance, we tend to focus just on individuals' work life. We almost treat people as two separate people. There's work self, and then there's life self. And that fracturing doesn't make sense, because that's not who we are, right? We're holistic people. What happens at home seeps into work. What happens at work seeps into home. And when we have an opportunity to bring, and I think that's what we talk about, bringing our whole selves to work. It's not about, just kind of showing up like you're having dinner with your best friends. It's about integrating the fullness of who you are and connecting that to goals that really help to fuel yourself and fuel the organization as well. So that's my take. What about you, Marc?
When I think of integration, I think of maybe this one coaching engagement where an individual was having a hard time. He was very analytical. He would bring a spreadsheet to our coaching sessions, and he would say, this is what I want to do, and use the mind map to kind of figure out what he want to do. I challenged him by saying, it seems like you're connecting to your work from here up. He wanted to just get through retirement. And he said, well, I can just kind of coast, I'll be okay. But part of the reason he left his last job is because he wasn't connected and wasn't driven. He wasn't excited. Now he's just kind of coasting. So I challenged him to create a new column in the spreadsheet, for example, and it was like passion. What's the passion that lines up with the task that you, or the job that you want to do? So the integration for me is like integrating heart along with mind. So that's what comes to mind in terms of integration.
I love that. That head, heart, hands type of framework and bringing your full self to work. Elena, what were you going to add?
Yeah, I, as you guys are speaking, I'm just reflecting on my own experience before, before I created a career that I love and found that purpose and so on. I remember finding myself, which I think a lot of people can relate to this, where you're like, listen, I'm not really super attached and my values don't align with the work that I'm doing, but all these other activities that I'm doing outside of work actually bring me that joy for me to buy more time until I actually get into that purpose-driven role. And I think a lot of people, realistically speaking, we live in times where sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. And I think the best thing an organization to do is to encourage other development areas for employees, because that will help them essentially be even better at work. I'll give an example of myself, like my podcast, for example, the creative work that I do, the content creation work, doesn't necessarily directly have been translated into the work that I do. A little bit, but not at all of the jobs that I've held throughout my content creation life, right? But I think it helped me keep going. It helped me, release that creativity. And now I'm in a role where I do utilize the skills, and it's very much connected. And all I want to point out is that, again, I think sometimes it's not always realistic for everybody to find that, but I think, right away, and it takes time. But I think as an organization, if you can just recognize that, to your point, Jordana, people are not just the work that they do. There's so much more to us. And as long as we create spaces where people can bring out some of those areas of purpose for them, right? I think that's just something that we can also think about.
Yeah, I love that, Elena, for a couple of reasons. One, I think people see purpose as something you find. It's not this holy grail that's like, poof, out there, I'm going to find it.
Yeah.
It's something that you intentionally create. And I think that purpose is also, it's not about you as a leader creating these opportunities for somebody else. It's about allowing them the space to create them too. So, you created your podcast and you connected the dots between ways that helps you become stronger in the organization. I can think of similarly times where, before I became a facilitator and coach, where I would always raise my hand to volunteer for things where I could learn something and translate it to the team. So it does take this collective ownership, but it starts with unpacking what that person is interested in and why. So, Marc, you talked about strengths and values. What are some ways that, as a leader or even as a person, I mean, I'm even thinking about the analytical guy that you were coaching, that you can explore them, because so often I think we take them for granted.
Yeah, we can do, there's the standard way, the more formal way of assessments, like doing a strength finder assessment, or like DISC, or, Myers-Briggs. I just think we need to give people opportunity, like doing things like, there's something we used to have in my old workplace called work stretch assignments. And that's within your department or other departments. That's where workers get a chance to kind of take on a mini project and just kind of run with it. Not necessarily being a DJ, but it could be, running developing a training module, for example, if you're an L&D, or if you're a manager, maybe you get to have a pet project as a project manager. And then it's a great way to kind of, like, I think, grow people and give people an opportunity to lean into their strengths, whether it's individually and or with a team, and just see what grows and blossoms from that. So I think creating sandboxes as leaders and as an organization allow people to feel like they tell themselves, this person sees me where I am. They meet me where I am. They allow me to kind of grow. I believe that we're gifted our worth at birth. We don't have to earn it. So I think it just allows us to kind of just grab onto that and explore that in the workplace, and then outside of that, just in our lives. I think we as humans are an ecosystem. Things like in Elena's example, she did the podcast. There might be a nugget that she grabbed from that she would bring to her other work, or if you take a class somewhere. I'm a big proponent of learning and development and transformation over time as a coach and a trainer. I think we all need to find opportunities to catalog something and be curious about it. Maybe use it at the least expected point in our careers and our personal life. Get curious. Have a list of things that, just a notepad, or maybe I do tell some of my coaching clients this, have a note where you take voice memos and you capture some thoughts as you're walking, or have a dream journal. When you wake up, capture some thoughts, So there's a lot of opportunities to explore, at the workplace or even outside.
Who
I
remembers
love
their dreams, by the way? I don't.
I do. I do.
I bet you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
I think
jealous.
yeah. Creative people, I think, tend to. And I love the two words you used in that, Mark. Sandbox and curiosity. I think sometimes we think that we're kind of nervous of giving somebody something because we think that, oh no, it's too big of a project, instead of thinking about it as a sandbox. Like, can that person add 5 minutes of fun to a team meeting? And instead of you having to come up with the icebreaker, they can come up with the icebreaker, the way to keep the energy going. Or maybe they bring music to the team meeting. I'm really obsessed with DJs today. I think that's because you can see the music, the instruments
Yes.
behind me, right? And that's another perfect example of curious. As people start talking about their hobbies or what they're passionate about, whether it's their family, whether it's things they're doing on the weekend, you see them light up. And that's a lens into what somebody's passion, values, strengths, and interests are. If somebody asks me about music in my band, I might talk about why I love it so much, about how it allows me to be creative. When I perform with other people, I'm collaborative and sharing that energy. It allows me to try something new and get in flow. Those are the nuggets, use that word too, that as a leader you can be listening for and going, okay, I heard that you love being creative. I heard that you love, being in the moment, trying something new. What are some ways that we can explore that for you at work?
I really like that, Jordana, because I think it's also just a very practical thing that managers can take away from this, because a lot of this stuff like tends to be on the HR leaders, but it's like it's actually should be like part of just any conversation. And sure, there's a bigger kind of challenge here, which is like creating an organization that encourages those conversations. And what I see sometimes is we're afraid to even empower those conversations about hobbies, because we think that somehow it's going to take away from the day-to-day work that people do, and it actually does the opposite. Actually, to this point of this conversation, is like it actually drives their motivation, their performance, and so on. Because again, for better or for worse, there's a lot of people who are doing jobs that they're not necessarily passionate about, but what brings us joy and gives us energy, if we're able to tap into those other areas that we are passionate about. Because guess what? And this is from a pure health and mindset perspective, it will fuel you physically and energy, it will give you energy and so on. So then you show up in your work, even just being even better, even if you're not super passionate about the job that you do, right? And I think that's we shouldn't be afraid as leaders and organizations to empower those conversations and to create space for people and to say it's okay if you're passionate about something that has nothing to do with this industry. So
yeah, I love that you brought up the connection to HR, Elena, because Mark, I think one of the things we see a lot is we put purpose in the values that are the posters on the wall or the slogans or the mission statement. So for HR leaders who are running those sorts of things, for C-suite leaders who are running those sorts of things, what can help them and what can help the organization authentically align individuals' purpose to the broader mission?
So I think organizationally, I think purpose needs to be baked in versus bolted on, meaning it's a daily culture practice. I mentioned mentoring earlier, and also point to leaders modeling corporate values and recognizing their employees' work. So that recognition, that acknowledgement, we do that in coaching, as you know, Jordana. So it's something that we can do with employees. Employees respect and are attracted to authenticity and transparency in their organizations. I believe some of the most effective organizations also have an interesting origin story or hero's journey that inspires and informs the corporate community. So I think in terms of something like a leader could do or an organization can do, as an L&D professional, I believe that you can create micro learnings on topics, ethics, etc. Maybe have a mentoring program or a new leaders program that can support employees, or some ways you can probably add that, potentially add value and get more buy-in from your employees.
You just mentioned storytelling, and you talked about that idea of the origin story or kind of a hero's journey for people who might not know what that is. Can you expand on that a little bit?
So I think, when you hear like Ray Kroc for like McDonald's, he started at, I think it was in his 50s. And then he at first was just focused on the food piece, and then he realized he was in the real estate business, not in the food business. And just hearing how he kind of built up his empire brick by brick. So that's a compelling story. And if someone wants to start a McDonald's franchise, or they want to be an entrepreneur or solopreneur, I think they'll hear a story like that and maybe listen. If they listen to the values in the story: tenacity, originality, fairness, etc. I think that inspires people, especially if they have values, personal values that align with that. I think as employees, we align with companies that are values in sync. When they're out of sync, we experience dissonance and dissatisfaction. So I think as employees, we need to seek out companies that were in alignment with their values. And in the corporation, I think we need to maybe keep that in mind when we have employees as they're looking for opportunities, and maybe do a values list, like a values itemized list. It's an exercise we use in coaching, and that might be a good way to kind of connect with your employees and find that out.
There's so much cool stuff, Marc, in what you shared, that I also want to help translate, not only for just at the organizational level, but also at the leader and the individual level, because that is how we create systematic change. Is we empower everybody through this, right? I can't bring out your best, Marc. You can't bring out mine. We can help each other. I love the example that you gave of the origin story of McDonald's, because I see so many times organizations are focusing, what do we want our values to be? And values come to the core of who we are. And how often do we actually spend the time sitting down and thinking about, why did we create this organization to begin with? What were we about? And figuring out which of those values is still true to us today, even though that definition might have evolved over time. I also love what you called out about modeling those values. I think there's been some of the best organizations that I've worked for have been those that actually have awards tied to the values. They're not just words on a page. You can nominate somebody for modeling that value. You give awards out for modeling that value. So we look for those actions in practice and look to the culture to define them. That origin story idea, I think, is a great exercise that isn't just at a company level. Teams come together, right? Why do they come together? What's that story of our origin? Why are we together as a group? Who are we? What is it that we're trying, to create as a hero? Even ourselves. If you ask an individual for the story of their career, how they've gotten to where they are, why they work where they work every day, you might find out, well, it's because I'm taking care of my family, or it's because I'm really passionate about this thing. But that helps to get to the root why, which is what purpose is really about. So I think that origin story idea is a fantastic takeaway that can be leveraged at an organizational level, at a team level, at an individual level.
Beautiful.
And if we talk about takeaways, what is I love that origin story takeaway. Marc, what is one takeaway that you want to make sure that people walking away from this conversation have?
I think that purpose is both consistent intention and practice. When you're consistent as an organization, as a leader or employee, that can be a game changer, both personally and professionally. And that helps individuals see that they can make a difference. Sometimes it's just 1% moving the needle, and that's enough for that day. Sometimes it's more. Remember, it's about progress, not perfection.
Purpose is practice. It's not a goal. That is a wonderful, I think, summary, Marc, and a fantastic takeaway to help people shift their own mindset. And also that idea of that, 1% shift. That's what we're about, right? That's everything that we're trying to do, is help people make those shifts. What are some of the smallest ways? I mean, I know we've talked about things that organizations can do, but what about like me as an individual? What's something that I can do to help shift, to bring in my purpose a little bit more into my day-to-day?
I think you need to do some reflection. I mean, there's a number of things that I think that you can do. I mean, we use in our coaching practice, but there's a book called The Artist's Way, where you can do things like, and this may not be for everyone, but you can do an artist date, which means just going somewhere to a cafe, sitting somewhere by yourself, and just kind of use your 5 senses to think about, what am I appreciating about this moment? And then just maybe write some notes, and you'd be surprised what comes out of that. But I think that that's one way to connect with purpose, or what's most important to you, to be in a situation and just take in what's around you. there are no ordinary moments. So earlier we were talking about bringing meaning to situations. I think that if we sit in a cafe, that can be a profound moment if we journal and we reflect back. I do a gratitude practice every day. I think of 10 things the day before, people, experiences. It usually involves my family, my son. And I find that there's always a nugget there throughout the day as I have that foundation. And maybe I use it in my work or maybe I don't, but it definitely connects me to a sense of meaning in my life. So I think that's one thing you can do. And there's a number of other resources out there as well.
I love that call
beautiful.
out of meaning and how there's meaning in every moment. We tend to get so distracted by everything going on around us that it's hard for us to take that moment to really just be present and appreciate it. And then even I hear getting curious with ourselves, exploring the why do I appreciate this thing? What does that actually signal about me? And that being a pathway to understanding what it is that you really value and where you feel like you're using your strengths. I loved hearing about your gratitude journal. Gratitude is very clearly something that you model and is a value of yours. It's funny, even though I know all the research behind gratitude, it's a word that I've struggled with for a long time. So I've kind of done my own take on it, where I have had it's one journal, but I capture 3 things that I learned for the day or tried newly for the day that I had never tried before, and 3 things that made me or somebody else laugh. And those connect to my values of humor and novelty and learning. And the more I did that, not only doing it for the moment, but actually whether it's once a week or once a month, looking through the list and seeing what's popping up for me. Are there certain people that I keep talking about or certain events? These are things that are important to me. How do I create more of that in my life? What are some themes about things I tend to gravitate for in new experiences, and how might I bring that into my work? Elena, any practices you would add?
I mean, with you on the gratitude, but I love Marc's point on no moment is ordinary. And I think if we're just willing to take a moment and just pause, I think that's what I'm kind of hearing from this conversation is like, just take a moment to pause as an individual, as an HR leader. I think we're just so busy and we're running, and we forget the important pieces of what makes us human, which is that reflection, introspection, and how can we help add value to people around us. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that call out, Elena, about the pause. To your point, we're moving so fast and we think we need to keep going to get at our best, but actually having those strategic pauses, those moments of reflection, those places where we can connect to purpose and meaning are those places where we can actually get that recharge we need to boost engagement, to boost well-being, to boost innovation, which all contribute to personal, team, and organizational performance. And if you want holistic performance, you need to focus on that holistic person and align not just the mission of your organization, but create the space where people can reflect and add their own meaning, values, strengths, and contributions to the broader world.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up this conversation, Marc, where can people get in touch with you if they want to continue the conversation with you?
Sure. The best way is to, the website, which is Prism of Purpose at prismofpurpose.com. And then there's also my email address, prismatpurpose@gmail.com. I'm also active on Facebook and Instagram. Also have a newsletter I put out. So if anyone wants to, subscribe, I put out regular articles and do pop-up calls. I spoke at a recent conference on somatic movement, which was really powerful for leaders in OD, and really enjoyed the experience. But yeah, that's the best way. I'd say through email, the website, reach out. Would love to talk to you. Let's have a conversation. If I can help, I'm happy to do so.
Amazing. And for us, Shiftwell, of course, please make sure you follow our LinkedIn page, check out the website, and stay tuned for other events that we have coming up. I think our next element is on mindset, and that is on October 30th. So please do make sure you join us for that one. And of course, for myself and Jordana, we hang out on LinkedIn quite a bit. So just reach out to us, have a conversation. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you both for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Elena. Thank
much.
you, Marc.
Thank you.